Fucking Jesus Christ. Help. Please. Someone call the police. Alright. What the fuck is up, y'all? So, today we have a very special video today. I wouldn't really put this under the category of my life is a mess, because my life isn't really a mess today. Thanks. So, we have a box here. It's a nice box. From the title of the video, y'all know what's in the box. All right? Cameraman knows what's in the box. This dude over here knows what's in the box. This fucking dog knows what's in the box. All right? So we're gonna open the box. I just have to find the knife. Hold on. This is a big multi-tool. Oh hell yeah! So let's just use the serrated blade. I'm using the serrated blade. So we're gonna answer. This is a bad idea. We're gonna answer a couple questions today about virtual reality. So if I can, that just ripped the tape off. This is a really good unboxing experience. I'm gonna stop using the serrated blade. Hold up. There we go. Very nice. Just. Ooh, you see how clean that was? Hold on, I gotta. Oh, this thing isn't even in saran wrap. I thought this thing would be in saran wrap. All right, everyone. So, we have the Rift S. So we're gonna tackle a couple questions today. One of the first ones is going to be, and probably the one that's going to be in the title of this video, is what is so great about VR? So as I'm opening up this box, we're gonna have a little discussion about that. So basically, before I actually got VR, I want to say around 6 months ago, I thought I got the OG Rift. And I'll tell you why I actually have the Rift S in a second. How do you open this thing? Is it this way? It is this way. I actually wasn't really introduced into VR until, ooh, look how clean that is. Look at that. Want to get that? Is that a good shot? So, around 6 months ago, a couple months before I actually bought the actual Oculus, I had, ever since the actual original Oculus came out, the prototype, and then when the first headset came out for, I believe, $349, I had zero interest in the product, like none. I was like, okay, you know, this is kind of cool, it's kind of nice, but I never felt that there was any real reason for me to go out and buy one of these things. I really didn't. But then, one of my friends of mine, who happens to share a similar name to me, it's very weird. I have a very uncommon name. He actually had an Oculus Rift, and is this in shot, by the way? So when I first put the headset on for the first time, it's a lot like losing your virginity, except for me, it was like, you know, sex probably isn't going to be all that great. I don't really want to have sex, except it was more like using virtual reality isn't going to be all that great. I don't want virtual reality. It was more like I didn't want to pay for it. But putting that on and experiencing virtual reality for the first time, dude, it's like better than sex. But anyway, I pretty much went out a couple months afterwards during a sale, and I went out and I bought the original Oculus Rift, and I had it for about 6 months. So today, I have the Rift S. I'm going to do some comparisons. I'm going to, you know, on camera, we're going to kind of experience it. I'm going to do a lot of compare contrast. Obviously, we're going to talk about specs like we normally do on this channel, and we're also going to talk a lot about, you know, live, like, yeah, we have these different things on paper, but how does that actually affect, you know, playing with it? So we're going to go through a couple of the comparisons, the most notable comparisons up front now. Can you stop playing with the dog?
Why do you have to sit so uneven to the freaking door? Shut up, Caleb. We're continuing. You shut up. My God.
He's eating my fingers.
Oh, eat him.
All right, so let's start on the different specifications of the Rift S and the Rift. I'm not going to go over all of them. I'm just going to go over the most notable one. You can just literally look up the differences between the Rift S and the Rift, and it'll show you pretty much all of the numbers and everything like that. So one of the biggest upgrades would be the resolution. So the actual resolution from the Oculus Rift was 2160 by 1200, which upgraded to 2560 by 1440, which changed from an 1080 to 1200 from the Oculus Rift per eye to the Rift S, which is 1280 to 1440 per eye. So we're basically changing from a 4560 pixels per inch to a 600 pixels per inch. One of the more interesting changes would actually be, because we have an increase in resolution, we had to sort of have a trade-off, and we actually went down in the actual refresh rate of the actual monitor inside of the Rift. So we went from 90 hertz to 80 hertz. I'm hoping that the trade-off will be remedied by the actual resolution being a lot higher. I'm hoping everything will look a lot crispier, because a lot of people using the Rift, I never had this particular problem, having relatively good eyesight, and I don't need glasses to play on the Rift, is that a lot of people using the Rift had almost like this, not fully immersed, you were almost looking through, essentially you're looking through glass to see the picture. Apparently this specific problem has been fixed in the Rift S. It's supposed to be a lot more immersive now, but from what I've heard, the actual analog slider from the Rift has actually been removed in favor of a more digital slider in the Rift S. You can actually see on the bottom there's no slider. You know how the slider would actually change the individual the glass to go in and out depending on how far away your eyes are? This thing doesn't have it anymore. So I'm hoping that won't be a huge issue. It is supposed to be fully digital now. So yeah, we had a slight increase in field of view from 110 to 115 degrees. Okay, so away from the specifications, probably the biggest switch from the Rift to the Rift S would be basically the thing that's missing here. There are no longer any sensors on the Rift S. That is because, as opposed to using, I believe they called it a, what do you call the stars in the sky? Constellation. They used a constellation system, which was basic. Shut up! They basically used a constellation sensor, which basically what it did is it was just a bunch of infrared lights on the actual headset and the controllers themselves, which would be tracked by the sensors. That's why you could basically, you can play the original VR. That's how you can play the original VR, the original Oculus in a completely dark room, and it would work just fine because, so basically all these infrared sensors on the actual device itself would be tracked by the sensors that you would have on your desk. And because cameras can actually see infrared, if you want to test this out, hold up your phone camera to like a remote controller for your TV and hit pretty much any button, and you'll actually see the little sensor on the actual remote. You'll see it glow almost like a purplish color. That's pretty much how the OG Oculus worked. But now there's actually an array of cameras. I believe there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there's 5 cameras on the actual Oculus. It's on the Rift S itself. 1 on the top, 2 in the front. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Yeah, 1 on the top, 2 in the front, 2 in almost like the bottom left and right, and 1 on the top. So big, nice. We have all those cameras. So unfortunately, you will have to play in at least a dimly lit room as opposed to a completely dark room. But for this first test, when we actually do the comparisons, we will be playing in a fully lit room. The website that I was reading all of this info off of has just crashed on me. Hold on. So because of this, one of the most notable differences from the Rift to the Rift S, because you're moving all the sensors, you have no more sensors, it's all cameras integrated into the device itself, is the device is notably heavier. It's not significantly heavier. I was thinking that it would be a lot heavier than the original Rift. It's not. It's actually still quite light, which I was expecting to some magnitude. And also, the original Rift had built-in headphones, which was pretty cool, honestly. If you didn't want to, they were removable if you wanted to use your own pair of headphones. The Rift S went a different route and actually has almost like it has speakers right next to your ears. So, and I think other than that, there isn't a whole lot of differences. The actual headband is supposed to be a lot more comfortable. It's supposed to fit on your head a lot more snug, and to kind of make up for it being a lot heavier. So I think that's pretty much it for the initial talk. We'll obviously come back to this sort of setting for our conclusion for today. But now we are going to set up the actual headset and kind of see exactly what the differences are between the Rift and the Rift S. Alright, so I've decided to actually kind of play around with the Oculus for a couple of weeks. Also because Nicopai's computer didn't want to work. His USB 3.0 ports wouldn't actually work on his computer, so the Oculus didn't work at all. So we had to kind of fix that around. But we're here, I'm kind of formulating my opinion, and so far it's actually fantastic. So first things first, one of the biggest things I was concerned about was actually the refresh rate. As I said a little while ago, or for you guys a little while ago, for me it's actually been a couple weeks, the refresh rate actually lowered from 90 hertz to 80 hertz. I am happy to say that the change in the refresh rate, the decrease in refresh rate, is basically unnoticeable. Especially coupling that with the higher resolution, it really actually gives for a better experience. But with all that aside, gameplay experience, so most of the games that I play are really fast-paced, such as, you know, Blade and Sorcery, we have Beat Saber, I played a bit of Minecraft, Gorn, stuff like that. Very high-paced games. Maybe not so much Minecraft, but those other games definitely. And I realized that the tracking is significantly better with the Rift S as opposed to the original Oculus. So I've noticed with the Oculus, if you move your hands too fast, I saw this the most in Blades and Sorcery. If you move your hands too fast, your hand will actually stick into a position, and you actually have to kind of wait for that position to kind of snap back to where your hand is supposed to be. It was super annoying, and you kind of, whenever you were swiping for swords, you almost had to swipe like this, like slower than you normally would. But I have not actually experienced this, so you can actually pretty much swipe as fast as you possibly can, and it usually tracks it really well. Another thing that I was worried about is, of course, all of the actual cameras on the headset itself are all located around the sides and the front of the headset. There are none in the back, obviously. And I was thinking that might have been an issue, especially for Blade and Sorcerer, where you actually do have to go behind your back to grab swords or down at your waist. And once again, that wasn't an issue either. What you will notice is if you do keep your hand behind you, in-game, your hand will actually slowly move and kind of snap back to where it should be if you were to bring your hand back. It's weird to look at, but you won't really notice it, especially when you're putting your hand behind your head or your side or your back or whatever. You don't really notice most of that because you're usually bringing your hand right back anyway. So I am happy to say the tracking is fantastic. Another thing is actually setting up the Oculus with the Guardian tracking, and the pass-through is much quicker than the original Oculus. Especially when you can actually see all of your surroundings around you. If we were actually doing this review with the original Oculus, the Oculus wouldn't actually be on my head. I can actually see the camera, I can see Nick, and I can, you know, see all around the room right now relatively clearly. Of course, these cameras aren't meant to be taking pictures. The resolution is quite low and everything is in black and white, and so everything's kind of blurry. Stop. But I can still see around you, and it's super helpful, especially when it comes to moving around, or if you think you've moved to, like for example, in this kind of play space, if let's say I move too close to this table over here, I'll actually be able to, check like, hey, is the table in front of me without taking the headset off. In some games, it will actually kind of screw up the game if you take the headset off, so that's really, really helpful. Another concern that I had is because of the cameras, how would the Oculus work in low light? Well, even with my Oculus Rift, I actually played with the Oculus Rift S with the lights completely off, and it works completely fine, the same as if the lights were on. I haven't really noticed any differences, and if there were any differences, they are incredibly minute. Of course, pass-through is sort of useless when the lights are off, because just when you are looking normally, your vision is obviously going to be obscured if everything is dark. And I think we're going to go on to kind of how the controllers are. So what I did like about the controllers is, I'm just going to show one because it's pretty much the same, they're both identical, is the layout on the actual controller is the same as with the original Oculus. And you'll actually realize if you were using the original Oculus and you're coming to the Rift S, your hands are going to fit exactly where they were on that controller. Now I have larger hands, of course. If you want to take a nice pick at that. I have larger hands, so the Oculus is, of course, it was annoying having the antenna on the bottom, at least I believe this is the antenna, having it around here, because if you actually tried to almost like open your hand, you really couldn't because the antenna was in the way. I really like how it's above now. It gives it a much nicer look, in my opinion. And yeah, that's pretty much for how the actual thing goes. It still uses AA batteries, which is a bit of a bummer. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the actual cover for the battery, it seems to have moved to the front, whereas on the other Oculus, it was more towards the side. I thought I would have issues with the actual cover for the battery sliding off. I really haven't had issues like that. But one thing I don't like about the new controller is actually the band. The band is made out of this, it's almost like a velvety on the inside, like a, I don't really know how to explain it. It's like this on the inside and like a latex or rubbery on the outside. Whereas on the old Oculus, on the original Oculus, it was more of a string, like a normal strap. Unfortunately, when you actually put your hand inside one of these things and you bring this little strap to kind of lock it in place, as you are playing, this strap will fall. It is a bit annoying, especially having to adjust it every once in a while, and especially because the strap is flat as opposed to the rounded rope that was on the original Rift controllers. It tends to twist and you kind of have to fix it, or else this thing will actually get stuck. But that's pretty much the worst part of the whole controller experience. And I think one last thing that I actually did forget to mention back when I was doing this is the Oculus Rift S does use a display port as opposed to an HDMI. And like I said in the box, unless I did actually say it, but it does come with a DisplayPort to a DisplayPort converter adapter, which is really helpful, especially if your only computer that you have to use one of these things
is a MacBook.
As I was saying, but yeah, like if you have a gaming laptop, I don't think I've ever seen a gaming laptop that actually comes with a full DisplayPort. I could be totally wrong about that, but your laptop, I'm pretty sure, has a mini DisplayPort. My gaming laptop has a mini DisplayPort. What I was disappointed to know is, even though I believe this is on the Oculus website, that the minimum standards for playing is a GTX 960, it actually is not supported on a GTX 1050. You will have to have at least a 1050 Ti for the 10 series graphics cards. I have an RX 580 and it works just fine. I was actually really surprised to see towards the beginning of when I was actually using an Oculus that it would actually run relatively well. even though I have my graphics card is about as equivalent to a 1060. But anyway, pretty much for my closing, I think that's pretty much everything that I have to say for hands-on experiences. But overall, I would definitely recommend the Oculus Rift S over the Rift. However, if you currently have the Oculus Rift, I would not go out and buy an Oculus Rift S. And that is what I'm going to tell you guys about in just a little bit. So, for my finishing thoughts for this actual video, I think a lot of people actually look at virtual reality headsets more as a PC peripheral, and I believe that this kind of mentality is misleading, if not completely incorrect altogether. The reason I think that is it's really not. So if you take a mouse from 10 years ago, an actual peripheral, you take a mouse from 10 years ago and you plug it into your computer, it's still going to work just fine as long as you have the, if it's not USB, if it's like a PS2 or serial, you obviously want the correct conversions, and it would work just fine. It's going to be compatible with any version of Windows normally. There could be outliers, I'm sure. But if you take an original Xbox, you cannot use it to play Xbox One games because there are different generations of the Xbox that require, better games, better graphics, more processing, stuff like that. And I believe that is the same way with virtual reality. So the reason I said if you have an Oculus Rift, there's no point in getting the Rift S. The reason I say that is think of the Oculus Rift as an Xbox One. And think of the Rift S as either an Xbox One S or an Xbox One X. I would probably put it more towards the X because of the actual changes make the headset better, but they both do the same thing. They both play the same games. They're both within the same virtual reality headset generation. Just like the Xbox One, the Xbox One S, the Xbox One X, and the discless Xbox One are all the same console generation. Now, as far as I know, the next headset that Oculus will put out will be a second generation, or I'm gonna refer to the Oculus Rift as the first generation Oculus, and this is almost like the 1.5, so the jump from like the Xbox to the Xbox One, or the Xbox One to the Xbox One X. I hate the name. But that's going to be more of a generational jump, the next headset after this. That headset is going to be able to support better games that the older headsets, the S and the original, will not be able to handle. Just like how the Xbox 360 or the original Xbox cannot play Xbox One games. And I think that's the big question. I know before I even had a headset, I thought that the Oculus was, or the Vive, or Lenovo has a headset. Dell has a headset, I think. I don't know. And then you have Windows, virtual reality, and all these different virtual realities. They are just within different generations. Currently, I believe that we're in the Atari age of virtual reality. This seems like really, really crazy technology, but it's really not. We have our wires. We have clunky headsets, especially I'm looking at you, HTC. We have, we're slowly getting rid of external sensors, but some things still require them. And even the controllers, they use AA's. Why? Why do they use AA's? They should be rechargeable, but that's a different argument. That's not what we're talking about today. But it's obvious that headsets are going to get smaller. They're going to become wireless. Eventually, they might not even require, controllers to begin with. They're going to have actual hand tracking. They're going to start creating gloves at one point to wear. It's going to get smaller, lighter, and more powerful, just like how consoles are. It's just the way that technology works. And I think people really have to put into the mentality that if you don't go into virtual reality now, you have plenty of opportunities to go forth into the future. My first console was the Nintendo GameCube, and I currently own a Switch, and there is a huge difference in performance gameplay between them. I mean, the Switch is literally a handheld console with more power than the GameCube. Hell, even the 3DS, I think, kind of matched the graphical quality that the GameCube had. Whereas the DS did the same with the N64. It's just the way that console generations go. And I think that's the way that everyone should look at it. Stop looking at virtual reality headsets as a peripheral and start looking at them as a generation. Like a console generation. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. It took way too long to put this video together. Way too long. Anyway, guys, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for the wait.